Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's RLC Foundation event, the second in a series on digital transformation, this one about digitisation and big data. My favourite subject, for those of you that know me, the number one subject in defence logistics. And so really pleased that we're having another session on it as part of the Foundation's approach. Understanding digital transformation, and in particular for me, the practicalities of digitisation of the network, using data insights to make increasingly more effective business decision has to be at the heart of optimised logistics, whether you're in defence or whether you're in commercial logistics. And it's certainly the key to the future of logistics in defence as they go forward with their own support transformation. Why is it important? All of those benefits that so many of us have espoused over the years, but chasing after the solution inevitably is harder than talking about it. But obviously, constantly seeking to improve the efficiency of the business process, consistency and quality, integrating our records into a digitized system, removing redundancy, shortening the communications chain, improving accessibility and facilitating better information exchange for our people, improving response times and customer service for a lot of us on a global basis. Really importantly, reducing operating costs, which is that kind of downward pressure we all feel all the time, and taking advantage of analytics and real user data and using it effectively, to sort of feed back into, better and increasingly more informed decisions. Of course, the difficulty is that, but how do we implement that? How do we get a digital mindset? Certainly, with my own sort of past experience in the military, but now in the commercial landscape, it's the same issues with this sort of digital mindset with our people. What is the reality of manipulating data and using information effectively, and where are the challenges in that? Where are the main areas for future investment? Where do we put our priorities, and how do we get the biggest bang for our buck in the shortest period of time? And do we think these future initiatives are particular to commercial business, or can we reasonably adopt those across into defence and use those effectively in that way? All questions. I'm delighted to say that with the panel that we've got lined up today, between their presentations and a question and answer session at the end, hopefully we'll tackle some of the key issues in that. On the panel today, we've got first up is Steve Clark. Now, Steve's the CTO for TVS, one of our foundation partners. He's been responsible for the design, development, delivery and support of the TVS MSIS information system, which is deployed across automotive, defence, beverage, utility and rail sectors. Steve leads a pretty big team of IT professionals in the UK and India, including business analysts, software developers, solution architects, software testers and AI data analysts. And so in defence, Steve was part of the Team LIDOS LCST bid team, and he's now playing a key role in the IT transformation of his high-profile program. A recent requirement of the program has been the introduction of the TVS MSIS, and in particular the electronic parts catalogue, which is the core of the Team LIDOS ECAT solution. This is currently being deployed to frontline commands to enable demand capture of a range of commodities and medical equipment. So Steve brings obviously a plethora of experience, both within defence, but importantly out in the broader commercial world. Following Steve, we're going to have Brigadier Nigel Allison, the head of Defence Support Chain Operations and Movements. And Nigel's got over 30 years of experience in military logistics in functional and leadership roles. Probably known to a lot of you already. Most recently, he's been Commander Logistics Support for the 1st UK Armoured Division, followed by being the Assistant Head for Logistics Policy and Plans in Army Headquarters. And then staying in Army Headquarters, he was the Assistant Chief of Staff Support until he moved to his current role at DISCOM, really at the cutting edge as a business unit, if you like, of digitisation in the logistic enterprise in defence. And with Nigel is Gavin Emmerson, also probably quite well known to a number of you. Gavin took his uniform off, I think it was last year, he took his uniform off, but he has, over 23 years of supply chain and logistics experience in the defence and humanitarian sectors. He's operated at the strategic, operational and tactical levels. He's highly experienced in global multimodal operations, and he's designed and orchestrated supply chains on a global basis. He's held any number of supply chain positions in the military, but more recently, since he's left, he's now formed his own company, Squarcle, which he's the managing director of, which is a boutique consultancy specializing in defense support. So I'm really grateful to all three of our speakers today for your time, and also for bringing your experience and views on this particular subject. For the audience, I'm going to move across to Steve in a minute, but whilst we'll go from Steve and then we'll go to Nigel and Gavin. But whilst they're speaking, if you could use the chat function to write down your questions, I'll try and collate them as we go along, and there'll be a chance for some questions and answers at the end based on the questions you put forward in chat. And I'll put those forward on your behalf in the session at the end. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Steve, and we'll go with his first go presentation. Thank you, Steve.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for that introduction, Angus. I was going to introduce myself and give a bit of a potted history of myself, but you've done the introduction for me. I'm just going to sort out the technology, as CTO people expect you just to be able to work it straight away. So yeah, I started life actually at British Aerospace. I was an apprentice at British Aerospace and went through the ranks there. And then when I joined TVS, I actually implemented our very first brand new product data management system. And we did that in the automotive world. And we applied those principles across all of the different business sectors that now TVS has been involved with. So I have been involved in many client implementations over the years, commercial and also with mod opportunities, for example, CRISP, C vehicles, and as Angus said, LCST. So for those that just don't know who TVS is, we're a global supply chain organization providing contract logistics, freight forwarding, and last mile supply to a number of different sectors. Angus mentioned them: automotive, beverage, defense, rail, and utilities. And we apply a common set of principles across all those. And we believe that because we were born in the automotive world, we naturally apply best practice across those other sectors. So we've been trading for over 100 years. We've got 15,000 employees in 50 countries, managing 3,000 plus suppliers. A key part of our proposition in contract logistics is to support field engineers. We support directly over 4,500 engineers. We actually touch probably about 20,000 different engineers. I'll come to that later. Today, I'm just going to focus on, I'm going to talk to 4 clients. I'm not going to do a TVS sales pitch. I'm going to talk to clients and the work that they've done in digital transformation, some very simple things and some common themes you'll see across all of those clients. I'm going to talk about United Utilities, Electricity Northwest. I'll introduce them, explain what they do in a minute. Dennis Eagle in the automotive world, and Network Rail in the rail world. Just going to talk, to the digital transformation of some of those. Oh, apologies, the technology's failed me already, hasn't it? 1 second. Apologies. Okay, so in terms of emerging themes and common themes across all of the clients and sectors, we absolutely have got companies that are looking to do rapid experiments. Companies years ago would take ages to get off the ground and to dip their toes, but we absolutely are seeing all of the organizations we're dealing with wanting to do something quick, learn from it, move on, adjust. So there is absolutely a change in behavior by our clients and organizations deal with. We're involved with AI, machine learning, drones and robotics. We did some work with Siemens to use drones to scan over the top of their rail carriages to check quality. We've put AI into image recognition to get drones flying around warehouses. But really, it's all about implementing low-cost solutions because people don't want to spend a lot of money investing in something that may just be on a whim and may not realize any benefit. So the benefit of where we are today is you can implement this kind of capability with low-cost IoT kind of capability. My experience today was product data management from a long time ago. Absolutely everybody is focused on robust data management, recognizing that is the foundations for all of the business decisions. Most things are built on data. Quality data, we all know where we've got problem data and arguably making bad business decisions based on that poor data quality. In terms of inventory, absolutely increased visibility of inventory. We want to know where it is. Where can we believe in the accuracy of the inventory? Do we know where it's located? Can we move inventory around the particular distribution network? That's absolutely a key driver for the industry. Resilience as well, making sure, think of the times we're in, the resilience of the supply chain is absolutely key. And organizations are looking and delving into the, apologies, my internet connection is unstable, it says. Apologies if you can't hear me. We're looking into the resilience of the supply chain, looking deeper down into multiple layers about making sure we can get continuity of supply. We all understand the challenges we have today of delivering a supply chain, people letting us down. And also shared environment. Most of the clients that we talk to, most of the companies want to operate in a shared environment. They see the benefit of sharing experience across multiple organizations. Empowering the commercial frontline. Absolutely, we want to make sure that we can deliver efficiency for our field engineers. The engineers expect to get real-time data. They expect to have e-commerce capabilities. B2B is really on a catch-up and always has been a catch-up with B2C, whether it's transport or whether it's access to data. And the people come to work and expect to do the same thing at work as they're doing at home. And sometimes we don't deliver on that. But that's absolutely a key point for our field-based customers. In terms of sustainability, a lot of focus on green initiatives, adapting to strategies. You know, a lot of people moving from, clearly in the automotive world, moving from, diesel powered, petrol powered into electric. We've, a lot of our clients like Dennis Eagle, ENWL, looking around battery powered, electric vehicles, that kind of thing. And what they all though recognize is the need to change, transform. It's critical, but they want to have people to work with. They absolutely need help in achieving that. So just before I go into just some of those organizations, talk a little bit about them. It's nice to do. We clearly don't get the feedback on Zoom, as I said to Angus before, but it's nice to just put something in, that's just a bit of a teaser. And I'm going to come back into at the end. So a bit of a teaser. This is about supply chain resilience. And so what is the connection between these Thai fishermen and the UK mod supply chain? So I'll come back and display that a little bit later, because clearly supply chain is complex, and looking at the end-to-end supply chain can be quite enlightening and quite interesting. This is quite an interesting, hopefully quite an interesting slide later. So Electricity Northwest. So for those that don't know about Electricity Northwest, they are a DNO. And now we first come to the first abbreviation. We know in the UK mod world, we love our abbreviations. So DNO is Distributed Network Operator. This is another acronym to add to those, I think, 13,000 acronyms that I once saw in a government document you could download with it was bedtime reading. But yeah, DNO, Distributed Network Operator. So they provide electricity to 5 million homes, and their end-to-end supply chain is fully outsourced. As an essential service provider, Electricity Northwest monitor and respond to any issues on the power network round the clock to reduce the impact on power cuts. Clear, trying to keep the lights on. As we know, many people working from home, self-isolating, with children at home, etc., relying on electricity more than ever. And so Electricity Northwest is a critical service, and their service has been fundamental to the country's effort in managing these times during this pandemic. Electricity Northwest engineers have significantly increased the amount of essential work on the network to add resilience to our services. In addition to the increase in MRO, another acronym, maintenance, repair and operations, activity, Electricity North West provide rapid response to support the Nightingale hospitals that they created in the North West. Those that know will probably saw it in the news, the one in Manchester. From a digital perspective, the engineers are fully enabled from an e-commerce point of view, so they've got full access to inventory, both planned, stocked, deployed, to ensure that they know what parts are available to make sure they keep the infrastructure going. Using an e-commerce platform, the team can carry out detailed assessments of faults. They can inquire on the availability of parts. They can order parts. They can see associated documents. You'll see some of the technology that's on the screen there. And this is the same capability that Angus mentioned that is deployed for the UK MOD for commodities. So online access to technical data, information, visibility of inventory, whether it's in an interdistributed network, the inventory could be in an NDC, distribution center. It could be in a set of depots. It could be in a set of forward stocking locations. A key theme as well is to push inventory to the forward stocking locations or to the engineering vans. So the critical nature of affected data is paramount to make sure we push the right inventory at the right time. So they've got to make sure they've got the right stock, because from a capability point of view, we want to make sure these guys are fixing or installing and looking after the network, not spending time traveling for parts. So they absolutely want to increase the efficiency of their field engineers and deployed the e-commerce platform across the whole of their team. With e-commerce, though, comes the need to have accurate product data to make sure we provide accurate data from a technical, safety, and commercial perspective. As I said, the platform's the same as the one that's used by MOD, and in addition, we also manage engineer van stocks and strategic hubs to establish a regional set of common parts that are used across the network. If we don't have quality data, that will be impacted. So within the depot, engineers use handheld devices or their own personal mobile devices to withdraw parts, and replenishment is all fully automated. If I just go to transformation. Now, I talked to some of these things earlier. I'm not really going to drive into this, but if you look at that's the transformation journey that Electricity North West have come on since 2014. It's not quite up to date because there's more stuff around the green agenda, but it's always information led. It's always empowering the frontline of engineers in our case. It's always looking at inventory optimization, and it's embracing sustainability. In terms of certainty of supply, we connected the customers to suppliers. So we went back down the supply chain and made sure that if an order is being satisfied by a supplier, that end customers are connected to that supplier. They can see when material is going to arrive. In terms of the connection across the supply chain, an engineer can place an order and it can be with a supplier within a matter of minutes. The supplier can confirm acceptance and delivery of that, and that presents back to the engineer. So absolutely tied together from a supply chain perspective. From a carbon agenda, sustainability is key. There's pressures to do more and more and more. And one of the other things that this company's looked to do is implement returnable packaging, returnable totes to replace cardboard. But with that comes the need to track those returnable packages. So there's a lot of value in that. Cardboard's throwaway. We've got the challenge of how do we dispose of it. But with returnable totes, you've got to track it from the NDC all the way to the customer and all the way back again. So that involves carriers, transfer of data, scanning RFID tags, because a lot of value in this returnable packaging. So return starts and coming back as well. The totes themselves, from a digital perspective, were either returned empty and we're going to track them back, or they come back with parts to be refurbished. In terms of strategic stock, I'm just going to talk a couple of things about what Electricity North West did in terms of deployed inventory. If you those remember the floods that we had in Cumbria, deployed strategic stock out into the field, storm cubes that could be called on, strategic stock there for critical faults that could be called on, and the visibility of that information through the e-commerce platform allows engineers in the field to know where can I go and get what I need to go and resolve the particular issue I've got. In terms of United Utilities, so United Utilities is another DNO. It's the United Kingdom's largest listed water company. The group manages the regulated water and wastewater in the northwest of England. 7 million homes are managed by this particular client. They've also outsourced their end-to-end supply chain, covering data management, order management, inventory management, procurement, warehousing, distribution. This is key to support their field engineering teams. Put simply, the MRO activities across United Utilities have significantly increased due to building water quality. So under normal circumstances, the flow through our taps, just keeps the pipes clean. But because of working from home, we've had high build-ups of bacteria, mineral levels, etc., mainly in businesses, and arguably we've had to increase engineer activity to do preventative maintenance and to resolve some of those issues that we find in various businesses. So to support the various challenges, we integrated with United Utilities to convert their digital monitoring into demand signals to enable us to be more responsive from a supply chain perspective, using the monitoring of components, activities, to then say, what do we need to make sure? What are we seeing is emerging? What do we make sure we get in the supply chain and make sure we can support these engineers? So we provided transparency of supply chain in terms of suppliers, the ability to respond to various challenges. And it's all about giving visibility to the engineers about where is my inventory. United Utilities' effort to respond to an increasing number of issues in the water supply system meant that with an e-commerce platform, they're much more able to do that, much more able to provide the service. Having technical and commercial information at their fingertips to make decisions with regards to MRO is arguably being brought about by that digital transformation and putting technology in the hands of engineers. It's critical for dealing with faults. Interestingly, just from a mod perspective, actually quite a lot of the engineers that work in this arena are actually ex-REMI. They actually come from mod. In terms of Dennis Eagle, so Dennis Eagle, D for short, they are the world leader in design and manufacture of refuse collection vehicles. Yeah, they manufacture over 1,000 units per year for local authorities and private sector contractors. So Dennis Eagle have outsourced their complete end-to-end aftermarket to enable MRO of over 20,000 vehicles in workshops around the world. They ship these vehicles to the US, Australia, etc. If you type in waste or waste increase into Google, you'll see that the amount of trash and waste has significantly increased over the last 12 months. And actually, there's been a 300% increase in the waste generated by households due to the pandemic and people working from home. This in turn has presented Dennis Eagle with a significant increase in the demand for new vehicles, plus a 25% surge. Sorry, that's just when you've got teams. Apologies. So that's that is a 25% increase in MRO activity because of the increased use of the vehicles going and collecting refuse from our households. Dennis Eagle implemented a strict data governance process because they wanted to streamline the introduction of products into the marketplace. And now we absolutely can take a vehicle off the production line, and we can have the in-service data available for the customer within a matter of days. Within a week, we say. It can actually be quicker depending on the build configuration. So effective integration between those manufacturing production systems with the aftermarket means that arguably the service data is available in advance of the customer taking receipt of the new vehicle. Wouldn't that be great that everybody had the service information available when they took title to the actual product itself? Data management and systems and processes allow the teams to allow them to look at engineering data changes. So the connected world allows us to look at the immediate effect of a supersession on availability or obsolescence, avoiding impact on service levels. So with a connection between production and in service, we make combined business decisions. One side doesn't screw up the other side. Dennis Eagle are long-term users of e-commerce platforms. They also have modules linked to e-commerce platforms to do quotation work for MRO, so they get accurate information about the asset they're looking after, the service activities they're looking after. And it's using the same technical and commercial data that the e-commerce platform uses when they're inquiring on parts, finding availability of inventory, etc. For this world, this is complex. Every single Dennis Eagle vehicle is probably bespoke. There's many, many unique features. There's a common platform underneath, but there's many unique features that make the criticality of data management, data governance so important. And finally, and again, we look at probably click and collect in terms of the retail world, but because of a distributed network, the engineers have got the ability to click and collect and go and collect material from depots, forward stocking locations, access to where am I fixing a vehicle, where's the nearest stocking point with that inventory. So just going on to Network Rail, I'm sure many of you know Network Rail owns and operates Britain's railway infrastructure. There's 20,000 miles of track, 30,000 bridges, tunnels and viaducts, and there's thousands of signals, level crossings and stations. Network Rail themselves operate 20 of the largest stations and support the other 2,500 where the train operators are running them. In-service support here is for over 15,000 field-based engineers. Their digitisation moved them away actually from a NDC to a distributed model. So Network Rail have decided that they don't want one single warehouse supplying all customers. They've moved to a distributed network, strategic stocking locations. So they've got an RDC, number of forward stocking locations, and many, many FSLs, all to support the MRO activities and deliver an improved service to the engineers that provide a service to arguably the rail operators. The e-commerce platform deployed, again, gives them real-time visibility of orders, real-time visibility of inventory in the various locations, exactly very similar to the other companies I've talked about. With this model, again, a more complex model, DRP, distributed requirements planning, forecasts inventory levels, at least at each location, and moves inventory around the network to suit the planned activities and the reactive activities on a daily basis. So just coming back to supply chain resilience. So for those that know, what I was talking about was Celox gauze. There's the NSN. I'm not reading that. 6, 5, 10, etc., etc. So in terms of Celox, and Angus will probably know this better than me, but Celox gauze is for pre-hospital use for trained emergency responders to stop bleeding of life-threatening injuries. The gauze dressing is laminated in Kitasan. Whilst the actual gauze itself is manufactured in the UK, Kitasan is produced from shrimp shells from a specific species of shrimp imported from Thailand. Historically, we've had a number of occasions where issues in Thailand have caused raw material to become scarce. Political unrest, for example, the tsunami stopped the fishermen catching these shrimps, and therefore the impact on the supply chain was significant. So, this kind of global supply chain issue, along with COVID, is forcing many of our organisations we deal with to set up study support groups to look at the digitisation world and also look at the resilience of the supply chain. They wanted to develop proof of concepts to understand the impacts of those kind of issues on the supply chain. All of those kind of initiatives require data, good, accurate data. Is it available? As we know, data and information can be easily distorted. So as we know, and I mentioned it before, this kind of thing is trying to accommodate that impact on supply chain, impact on our ability to deliver a service. And we know there's still problems, and there will be problems for the next year. So thanks very much for listening. That was hopefully short and sweet, and I'm ahead of schedule. Just as a summary, providing field engineers with accurate, up-to-date information, commercial information is absolutely the norm in those sectors we've worked on. It's a central part of client digital transformation strategies. And if we look at anything, the pandemic we've had has been an absolute turning point in providing e-commerce solutions to clients, changing the way we're doing business. It's all organizations are desperate to accelerate and change as we change, from a consumer and a business perspective. And I think all of those organizations recognize that unless we adapt quickly and embrace digitization, you're going to get left behind. You're going to get left behind to wither away. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks very much for listening. Hope that was well received. And I'd now like to hand over to Brigadier Nigel Allison. Thank you.
So thank you. Can I just get confirmation that you can hear us loud and clear, please?
Yeah, we're good, Nigel. We can hear you.
Yeah, we're good.
Fantastic. And you can see our screen.
Yeah, you're fine.
So thank you. So good afternoon. As advertised, I'm Nigel Allison, head Discom, and I arrived here in October 2018.
And Gavin Emmerson, I arrived early 19 to join Brigadier Nigel.
So here is the scope for today. So quite a lot of slides, I'm afraid, but of course a presentation on digitisation and big data would be quite dry and difficult without it. And also we've taken out the builds because of the sort of the Zoom risk. But in essence, we're going to take you through our journey with its challenges and lessons, and hopefully bring to life what digitisation and big data can look like in defence, and of course what benefits it can deliver. So I'm mindful not all the audience will be familiar with DISCOM, the Defence Support Chain Operations and Movements Organisation. So we plan and execute all strategic movement in support of overseas operations and defence activity. To enable this, we are the tasking authority for Defence's strategic moving assets. So the aircraft such as C-17s, Voyager and A400Ms. In addition, we also task and contract manage the 4 times strategic RoRos that Defence has on contract. We're based in Abbey Wood. We're 172 strong, which is made up of service personnel across all 3 services, civil servants, reservists and contractors. We sit in UK Stratcom within the newly formed Defence Support Organisation. So when I arrived, like all good officers, I decided to sort of conduct an in-depth estimate of the organisation and sort of have a formal review called a 100-day review. Now, in that, we identified some clear challenges. So there's a growing and complex demand without any associated uplift in strategic resources. i.e. more aircraft, more shipping. And it wasn't just a demand in terms of volumetrics, it was a demand in terms of complexity, longer lines of communications, more complex evolutions of operations, such as that planned for the deployment of the carrier group. Now, in addition, Discom was very reactive to requests. Now, this was fixing the organisation in the firefighting of the here and now, and really preventing us from lifting our chins up and being an intelligent provider with a nod towards the future, you know, being that efficient and effective provider to defence of choice. So based on these findings and the fortunate timing of the financial year that we seem to be slave to, I was able to secure some underfunding to carry out a diagnostic study using external support. Now, this looked across people, process and systems, and it found that there was sort of poor behaviour, particularly in the customer area, and there was sort of ambiguity over roles, responsibilities. In terms of processes, there was no real forward planning, and in fact, you know, the forward plan at that stage was an annual Excel spreadsheet, and there was no sort of recognised upfront decision points. And then in terms of system, we had absolutely no cost visibility of what we were doing, and we had lots of fragmented data. Indeed, within Discom, there were 16 separate sources. So what? Well, following that, we conducted sort of some strategic gap analysis to determine where Discom needed to go to meet the requirements of defence. Now, that's all encapsulated here in a vision, which I realise can be pretty simplistic, but of course, you know, language is important. In terms of intelligent, it was about being an intelligent provider, preemptive and offering choice. We needed to be resilient, you know, the need to be a sustainable organisation 24/7 against a threat-based scenario, as opposed to being a lean business unit. We needed to be effective. Clearly, operations remain no fail, but we need to measure that and improve where we can. Cost to serve data, and we weren't sure how efficient we were using our assets in terms of utilisation. We weren't integrated, and of course, to get real benefit, we need to integrate across the end-to-end enterprise. And we needed to think more multimodally and globally through the use of hubs and different modes. We tended to think in a very analog manner across the whole piece. Now, all this was underpinned within an overall strategy. And of course, unfortunately, I can't show you that today because it's at official sensitive level because of the operational slant to it. But I think the important point is you need to invest in the analysis up front from the start. Think through the second and third order effects, understand what is needed from you, and then the strategic direction of travel for defence. You get that right, and you really set yourselves up for success in transforming an organisation. So it's interesting to note that this was all completed before we had the Defence Support Operating Model Construct Report, and then the more recent Defence Support Strategy, and then of course, just this week, the outcome of the integrated review. But it's really interesting to note that that hard work up front has meant there is no need to change our direction of travel in terms of transformation from those, as we basically managed to foresee what defence would want strategically from us into the future. So I mentioned we can't show you the overall strategy, but we did generate a standalone Discom strategy for transformation. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I want to make 2 points. It positioned us well and early to seek investment from the fairly new Support Transformation Fund. At this stage, we were not a planned programme, but made a compelling case, albeit not without risk. And then if you go to the bottom right, at the heart of this is using big data and digitisation. And it was really the idea of creating Discom as that supply chain brain function for defence.
So our approach then, if I just take us through the approach, if you recognise Brigadier Nigel's case for change there, you'll recognise some of the key initiatives or key projects that we stood up and I would say mobilised at pace. The approach to transformation was something of a agile delivery with a wrapper around in a transformational, more deliberate approach. So they not wanting perfect to be enemy of good, wanting to release benefit nice and early rather than a large waterfall activity. We created and mobilised 6, I would say, acceleration projects that allowed us to get out of the starter blocks, understand the programme, understand the challenges, and start to, in a very spiralled way, deliver benefit to defence. So you recognise that the strategy that Brigadier Nigel just spoken about there, integrated support chain. We developed a control tower concept that sought to integrate people, process, systems, not only within DISCOM, but wider to the left and right of those boundaries. If you imagine organisational boundaries, the bigger the boundary, the bigger the inefficiency. That's the same when it comes to people, process and systems. So the decision centre really is about integrating within wider defence the processes and making good decisions. And there's a theme as we go through this presentation today about good supply chain performance is driven from good processes and good decisions. So the decision centre was central to that kind of thinking, and certainly that cerebral brain function that the Brigadier just spoke about. And then we recognised that clearly we didn't have a medium to long-term planning process that was digitised. We were very analogue in nature, and to enable us to be more resilient, we decided that we would require a medium to long-term digitised planning process that allows us to smooth out demand and stop the firefighting or reduce the firefighting in the execute horizon. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. But cost control, limited visibility of costs, not a strong hold, or we didn't really have our arms around cost. The cost control project started in year 1 with a cost baseline and developed towards a cost to deliver model that allowed us to understand the supply chain costs, and the insights that we gained from the cost control project today has allowed us to really embed some of the financial metrics and numbers into our applications and our processes, so we enable decision making at the strategic and also tactical levels of processes, and we give decision makers the right information irrelevant of rank. As the Brigadier says, decision making is about empowerment as well as strategic decision making. And then continuous improvement. Clearly we're going through a transformation now which is unsettling and undisturbing to all. A continuous improvement in the DNA of DISCOM will prevent us from getting outdated at pace and allow us to keep and maintain that pace of change and really act as a strategic edge as we move forward. And then digital, clearly we're going to talk about that today, so I'll not mention that, but a supply chain network design project will allow us and has allowed us to understand our global network. It allows us to understand the modes, the nodes, the floors. Do we have the right fleet size? Is it the right shape? And is it optimal? And more importantly, is our supply chain by design rather than potentially what it has been previously, which is setting up individual lines of communication as and when we require. So we talked about the 6 acceleration initiatives. The starting block allowed us to get through and out the door at pace, but of course it needs to be done in a more deliberate manner and more coherent, not only with the new defence support operating construct that's being developed, but also internally within DISCOM. So target operating model approach and a wrapper was shrouded around those 6 areas, allowed us really to design the end-to-end processes that flow through DISCOM, the decisions that are made across those multiple time horizons, as it's those processes and those decisions that allow us to drive the performance that meets the Brigadier's strategy in those areas. So a little bit about our digital approach to change. So quite clearly, we've taken a performance-led approach with regards to our transformation. You've got the Brigadier strategy, those key kind of key critical words: intelligent, efficient, integrated. So we've designed a performance ambition that matches those key kind of tenets within the strategy. And then what we've done throughout the process on a business process-led change is engineer processes that drive that performance, that allow us to make decisions across the multiple horizons, and it's by digitising those processes that allows us to have the access that we need to drive the processes and the decisions to drive the performance. And we've done that using low-code technology that's regularly available through Defence Digital, and it has allowed us to spiral the changing at pace and not only understand the processes and the challenges in more depth, but it's allowed us to release the benefit rather than waiting for 3 years and then the benefit to appear towards the end. We're releasing benefit as we spiral through that change now. Of course, there's a worry there that if you do that and you do it at pace, that you will lose your way at the beginning towards the end of the transformation. So the Brigadier and I and the team developed a transformational roadmap from the as-is, and we managed to get Gartner to do a maturity assessment of DISCOM, where we were previously, lacking control. We had limited visibility. We were quite reactive by nature, with plenty of surprises due to a lack of digitised medium to long-term planning. And this last year, and then as we move into this financial year, we gained a degree of control. We've now got consistent processes that are improved, which has improved visibility through good data and reduced the firefighting in the execution horizon. And then as we progress towards the end of this year, we expect to be more capable. We'll be more faster, we'll be effective through greater analytics and digitised processes that hopefully, where possible, we've automated out and reduced waste where possible. And then, of course, as we progress over the next 12 to 24 months, we expect to be more clever with sophisticated management of cost to serve and increased advanced analytics to affect decision making.
Thanks. So I want to turn to sort of delivery challenges now, because of course life is never easy, and so we've met many along the way. So starting with culture, which of course is both internal to our own workforce and external into the sort of MOD organisation as a whole. Now, to start with, defence processes and scrutiny are not well suited to agile development, but we were determined to start delivering in the first year, which made life quite uncomfortable. Defence culture is still pretty analogue, both in terms of articulating the possibilities up the chain of command, but also in changing processes. So, how we plan for operations, how we manage operations in flight, all of which can be absolutely enhanced by digitisation. We find getting defence people to buy in to safe to fail along the way is incredibly hard, even when it comes to tech development. But driving a programme at the tempo we wanted means we were going to have a few failures along the way. And of course, the key is to learn fast from these, recognising sometimes that things may get worse before they get better. And that's happened a couple of times. We found ourselves very much at the tip of the spear of digitisation, often operating ahead of policy. And this provides both opportunities and risks, which means you can shape your own future and the future of defence, but also when policy catches up with you, sometimes you need to change direction. And of course, we're competing for scarce defence-wide digital resources as they themselves rapidly grow. Defence's fractured data landscape is well known, and this has impeded progress, although we've got into areas we just didn't know existed, like data blending. But Defence is very much alive to this requirement for usable data, and things are improving very fast. For example, we now have the supply data warehouse shortly to come online. So turning to the next slide, if you like, this is our user guide to digitisation from the lessons we have learnt, going from left to right. Now, when it comes to a vision and strategy, I've already mentioned the importance of this and the investment required up front. Without it being rigorous and honest, your future plan may be built on pretty sandy foundations. Next is translating that strategy into a performance ambition. What is the effect you're seeking? What is good enough? It doesn't have to be gold-plated. It doesn't have to be 100% effective. The next part is your mapping of processes, user experiences, and decisions. Now, this is pretty unsexy, but it requires a lot of work. And again, if you don't invest in this and get it right, you won't succeed in digitising your organisation. You then need to capture all of this, including the user requirements in a specialist tool. And then you need to mobilize a multi-skilled and integrated DevOps team. And of course, defence isn't used to this, and we have found that being a challenge, and which Gav has talked about. But that also needs to remain. And in fact, we are going to have a DevOps team in our future construct going forward in DISCOM. And then Gav has already spoken about developing and integrating that technology in an agile manner. We were determined to realise benefit early, knowing that they won't always be a mature capability. And that is working out really well. And then it's not over once that digital capability has been delivered. You need to establish a mechanism to continually improve. And it's all about remaining relevant in our case and continuing to give defence what it needs. So these are the tools we're delivering as our digital suite. Fairly self-explanatory and definitely recognisable to supply chain practitioners. But for those out there in defence, this is innovation in practice, and we are using big data and digitisation now. And we want to take you through an example. So let's take the demand planning tool as that example. So this is a screenshot of the demand tool overview, and it's using dummy data, I should point out. Because of OPSEC reasons. And this capability is now in business as usual. Now, going back, I've mentioned it to provide you the context. Previously, the Forward Strategic Lift Programme for Defence was an Excel spreadsheet submitted annually by the frontline commands that was immediately out of date and only went out to 12 months. And of course, it didn't have the data that you could crunch and analyse. So now we have a tool that looks out to 24 months on a rolling basis, with plans to extend that out to 36 months. The demand is digitally entered via an app by the frontline commands and users. You can crunch the data multiple ways and go up and down several layers. You can do it via geography, load type, whether it's passengers, freight, dangerous goods, ammunition, protectively marked material. You can look at the dates, duration, destination, unit type, and it goes on. More importantly, this can now be matched with supply data against our air, sea, and commercial capabilities. What aircraft types available? Is it a planned, unplanned schedule? Are we utilising those strategic assets to their maximum? And then finally, with our request management tool, which is currently under development, all that can be scheduled automatically in draft. And all the while, of course, we can amend the algorithms, which we've done during COVID. The example being for passenger aircraft, where we had a reduced capability due to the requirement to separate. We were able to set that into the demand tool and then plan going forward.
So then, we've seen what you can get from the data from a digitised process, but how did we get there? Well, as we've discussed, it's about good process and good decisions, and that drives performance. So what we were keen to do is map out the process at a high level and then drill down and come up with those requirements that we needed to get the right data to make the right decisions. So if I orientate you to the slide there, you've got a 0 to 36 month time horizon. The conveyor belt in the centre is activity moving closer towards you, and the boxes are a representation of activity. And the closer the boxes get to the execute horizon, the more detailed information you require to make better decisions. But of course, that doesn't mean that we can't make decisions further out. So in the 12 to 24 month space, for instance, we know that if we're doing activity in the Middle East, it could be in the second half of the year. It could be, we think, roughly an armoured inf battle group. And we think, we want to do something else in Europe at the same time. During that time horizon, we can smooth out that demand and say, actually, if we make a decision now, why would we do 2 large exercises or 2 activities in that same time period? Why don't we do one at the beginning of the year and one towards the end of the year? And we can arrange with our allies and get the SOFAs and the rest of the agreements in place to smooth out that demand signal as it comes closer towards us. And of course, as it gets closer into the 3 to 12 month space, and every month we do this iterative process with more information, we'll make more granular decisions. But each time we're smoothing out that demand signal, and we're making cost-effective decisions rather than it hitting in the execute horizon. We're executing against a plan that potentially is outdated, uncontrolled in terms of the data that we've had, and costly. So as it enters that 0 to 3 month space, we've got a more informed decision. We've made good decisions as it hits us, and we've stripped out cost, but we've increased the resilience by making decisions and pushing those decisions as far out as possible, but being big enough and clever enough to refine those decisions as the activity gets closer. So how did we do it? Well, we defined the processes, we defined the decision we wanted to make across those time horizons that we've spoken about, and then we captured the requirements. We engaged with the end user, we sought to understand the process and the customer's requirements, and then we created a list of those requirements and entered them into something called the product backlog. This is not new terminology, it's an agile way of developing technology that's pretty well known in industry, and we prioritize those requirements based upon the performance return that we would receive from carrying out that development first. And then we based on those priorities, requirements, we sized up the design of the software in line with those design principles that we've spoken about, and we started to build the software based on the design functional requirement. We then carried out a series of testing, both alpha testing and beta testing, which was conducted by the end users. And it's really worth to note that whilst this is done at pace and it's spiraled in, perfect's not the enemy of good in this space. So you design, you get a 60-70% solution, not all the same bells and whistles, but by doing that, you understand the process better, you understand the data exchange or the information exchange requirements better, and you inform what decisions you can make by putting yourself out there and learning through this journey. And of course, you release the application and then you start again and you start to refine that, and you get a more polished application and you make better decisions. But each time you're going through this process, you're releasing that benefit that we've spoken about. So in this instance, with this one process, it was developed over 24 to provide a 24-month view of demand. It provided early insights, enabled us really to mitigate and reduce risk in the execution phase, providing that resilience that we've spoken about all the way through the strategy down to reality of what it means on the ground. And it includes early approval of spend, which has meant Discom can provide services at better rates while increasing reliability and resilience of the movements programme. And that's all been done by that digital demand capture. So one of the customers, of course, it's a digital application. That demand process, that demand capture is captured via a web application that the customers, in this instance, Army, upload and refine every month during that process and iteratively give us that further detail. This is one piece of feedback that we had from Army. The Army have used the new digitally generated forecast to smooth their movements plan. So now we've got the customer being intelligent, smoothing their demand signal, which has increased the use of the defence assets and decreased commercial charter costs. So really, by rolling this application out, not only through the process, we've smoothed our demand signal out for our processes, but we've got a customer that's thinking like that also and driving the right behaviours. So what next then? So we expect to implement the core processes and the cost to deliver and build out from this one piece of application that we've spoken about. And we've already started that journey, as the Brigadier showed on one of the previous slides. We're applying the methodology to supply chain processes. So the first half of the programme is being about workflow, digitisation of the existing movements processes and bettering those. And we're about to become more supply chain than just movements and distribution. And indeed, make sure that we're making cost-effective decisions throughout all those processes, whether they be standard score processes rather than just the movements processes. Enhancing the decision-making capability by broadening the data set and integration with wider supply chain activity, people and processes. And then, of course, we are seeking to engage more with BMFS for a longer-term view of life. The Director Joint Supports organisations just stood up and we expect to be engaged more with the Defence Support CIO, Richard Puttock, and make sure that we absolutely are aligned with them, and then progress forward over the next 2 years.
Thanks. And of course, doing this is not just about achieving on our vision, it's about providing benefits. Now, the case for our transformation was made based on operational benefits, which you can see here as a range of strategic outcomes. And on the whole, as we've just described, they're already being delivered to a degree and are measurable, noting that we are still in year 2 of a 4-year programme. For example, we are confident that in this next year, we will achieve at least a 15% increase in productivity and utilisation for our military air transport fleets and the strategic RoRos. And we have used the demand tool several times to provide strategic advice into the MOD. There are also financial benefits in terms of both cost avoidance and cashable benefit. Forgive me, however, I'm not at liberty to show these yet. So there's still some scrutiny and governance process in play, but they're not insignificant and would benefit a number of the MOD's top level budgets, such as Army, Navy and UK Strategic Command. So all that said and done, what are our key takeaways? Well, first of all, hopefully, particularly for the defence people out there, we've shown that digitisation can be done and indeed must be done if we're to modernise and be a much more effective and efficient organisation. And whilst what defence is doing is not perhaps as comparable to some of the shiny products that Steve was showing, we're getting there, and it is transformational from our perspective. You know, data is king, but the start point in defence, as we've seen, is challenging, but it is improving. It's getting better rapidly, and we're hopeful that within the next year, we are going to have several established and cleansed data warehouses from which we can draw our data quickly. Sponsorship's important. Now, I'll call out our very own General Angus here. To get this programme going required someone to put their head above the parapet and resource it. And we're very grateful that he did. And you can see what's been achieved once we had that resource. But don't underestimate the cultural challenges in doing so. You know, we were alive to change management and all the models. We knew that it would be difficult at times, but the defence culture works somewhat against us in this. But again, it's improving as people come alive to digitisation. An obvious one, but change requires resource. Why do I say that? I guess industry are all aware of that. But as I came into Discom as an example, there was a frustration that Discom hadn't already applied some significant change because they were told to do so, but they hadn't been resourced. It was already a lean, busy, operationally focused organisation and just didn't have the additional capacity to do any meaningful change. Develop and integrate technology in an agile manner, and you've seen the benefits of doing so, both in early release of benefits, but also in learning and then being able to exploit what you find along the way. But in doing so, be prepared to fail, but you must learn fast from that. And very much one of the key messages today is performance is driven by good process and allowing decision-making at the right levels. And then finally, once you've delivered, you've got to continually improve, and you've got to establish the mechanism and resource to do so. And again, for defence, that does mean standing up a tech team. So that is the end of our presentation. I hope you found that useful.
That's great. Russ, are you going to put all three of us up? Not sure that can work. I'll hold on a second. It's just going to do that. While Russ just adjusts the screen view, can I just say thanks very much to both of our speakers. Great sort of exposés, both of commercial application and what I described a couple of years ago as the digital startup in defence, which is Discom, and really great to see how far they've driven that agenda over the last couple of years. But of course, inevitably raises any number of questions now as as people look harder and harder at the digital landscape and how to approach the thing. So I'm going to start off, there's a number of questions in. I'll start at the top, and Justin Yates, because he was first there, so I'll go first with his question. Thanks, Justin, for your question. Steve, it's one for you. He said, if TVS are making the stocking decisions, how are you measured, reviewed and incentivized to get stocking right?
So, yeah, good question. So under some contracts, TVS take title to the inventory, so clearly it's in our interest to make sure we get the right stock in the right location, where cash is king. But generally, for all contracts, we're incentivized to provide a level of availability, availability costs, and often there's a incentivized from a reward point of view. So if you look at contracts we've taken over, for example, I remember Crisp we took over, I think it was 45% availability, and we got it up to in the 90s. So I think we've got a track record of reducing inventory, increasing availability, but arguably incentivized by a contract always helps.
Great, thanks, Steve. Peter Jones asked a question, and Nigel and Gav, I'll come to you with this one. It says, he's quoting Tom Coppinger-Symes at us. So quoting Major General Tom Coppinger-Symes, intuitive use of information is especially important in warfare when usually tired, stressed, scared, cold and wet, or hot and thirsty, whilst being easily distracted by bits of metal flying past your head. How is Discom and TVS assisting in managing that cognitive load to achieve information advantage across the spectrum of defence? So that's quite a big question there. I guess if you tried to sort of boil that down, how's this playing into the kind of operational space to make operators' lives easier, more deliverable? Nigel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I guess I can answer that in several parts. I mean, to begin with, in our design, we've been sort of keen to make sure that at each appropriate level, people are getting the data that they need to make a decision, and aren't just getting all of the data for the sake of it. But of course, that works two ways as well. And it's about there being a sort of disciplined chain of command in terms of not requiring all the data. You need to know the data required to make a decision. And I think that is something that defence is struggling with more broadly. We've kind of gone through that. But what I would say is actually providing that data in a usable manner certainly helps enhance that cognitive load for a person. And it's remarkable how processes that used to take a great deal of a person's time under pressure, using Excel spreadsheets and notebooks and pens, which literally, were being used before we did this process. You can make a lot of mistakes, whereas on these tools, you can very quickly crunching a number of different inputs to get multiple colours. And that includes during operational management. So something that on the face of it may look to overload someone's decision, actually using these tools, it might not be as a significant shock to the system as they perceive, and it will show you several solutions to get yourself out of that. Don't you want to add anything, Gav?
Yeah, I mean, to bring that to life, it's clearly to prevent cognitive overload is not to, in the first instance, provide any individual with too many decisions to make. So a way of preventing that would be to automate out as much as possible, put the human in the loop to make the decisions that are important to us. I think that's really a really important feature of the application and the process design. So for instance, if we're always sending things to a certain region by commercial air, why do we need to do that apart from just let the information request come through Discom and then travel straight out to our commercial provider and then get involved in the things that really matter to us, like dangerous goods, things going to difficult places that are difficult to move.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I would add that we are moving away from trying to view everything to really doing exception management. But of course, that's an industry standard. But in defence, we've been reluctant to do that when it's operationally facing. But again, that reduces the load that a person has to look at and react to as incidents occur.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Steve, I'll come to you. I guess the context for you is sort of in productivity in the commercial space.
Well, yeah, just add to what Nigel said, because the acid test for me is, can I give the application to the user and can they use it? If they understand the content in the application, but I'm told, and apologies if I misquote this, but I'm told as like, you go and use James, it's a 2-week training course. Well, I give you an application. Can you use it? People say they want the Amazon experience, and I know why they say that, because Amazon can be, I don't want all these flashing lights, etc. As the folks, as Gavin and Nigel said, we want appropriate information. So a good design about the types of items that have been demanded, or the information. So creating schemas to make sure you can present the appropriate information based on the type of asset or item that you're looking at is critical. So I think that is the acid test. What I struggle with actually in the defence world, much better in the commercial world, is getting feedback from the end customer. There are too many layers of comms to get to actually what do the true frontline command users think. That's critical. But arguably, can you give it? Can people say, I want the Apple app? Can I just go and use it? And that's the acid test.
Yeah, and I think that's the standard, certainly with youngsters these days, that kind of says whether it works or whether it doesn't, frankly, which is quite interesting. Gavin, I'm going to come to you next. The next question is kind of based around some of the things you were saying about agile. So agile is a challenge because Defence's acquisition process is geared around a system of systems engineering approach. As Brigadier Nigel says, operating ahead of policy is risky, but if the benefits can be clearly articulated, policy should follow suit. The cortisone program is an emergent example of this approach, which I think is the medical log-IS program. And to add to the LFE slide, understanding HFI is key, and the way that human-centered design can work with systems engineering in a complementary approach. I guess if I tried to kind of turn that into a full-on question, this is from Nick Krakinowski. It is, how do you break agile out in a non-agile organization and make it stick? Because I've seen that in a number of different places where you can think agile, you can play agile, but the enterprise you're in is not agile.
So I think there's two parts to that. There's the organizational leadership needs to give you that breathing room. So as a program manager, the program director, and actually yourself there, General Angus, back in the day, sponsored the activity, but not just financially, but you were bought into it, and you were allowed headroom to say, okay, we're going to fail fast, we're going to learn fast. So there's definitely a leadership element of that, and then there's clearly the commercial bit that sits up under that, and how you navigate that in an agile way, which can be overcome, and we've done that. But then it goes back to Steve's point, really. If you think about if you just strip it back to a very basic principle of change, how do you get people to buy into the application? How do you deliver change? And you talk about Cotter's 7 steps to change, and about giving something, displaying benefit. Whatever you design, it's got to be beneficial to the person that's using it. And then you've got to keep going back to that customer or back to the user of the application throughout the process, and showing the benefit, and then going back and developing it further. So they're bought into the change process, but also the tools are useful and have utility to everybody in that chain. Does that answer the question?
Sorry, Gav, can I just jump in on that? And one thing, and it happens in the commercial world, and I get my guys to do it. One did it this week, got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, went out with an engineer. We've got a mobile stock management system that manages deployed stocks. Engineers consume stock. And he went and spent a day with engineers. So, don't live in your little bubble or your little office. I'm not saying, but go and experience it. Walk the talk.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I'm going to come to a question which I think is really critical, and frankly, it's in anybody's digital transformation. It's kind of the big question. I think defence has a very particular issue with it, and I think it's from my very good friend Paul Kettle. He says culture has been mentioned in both presentations. What key things are required to get the appropriate digital culture aligned within MOD? Perhaps I'll come to you first, Nigel.
So I think there's a certain extent here of the classic say-do gap in defence, as you recognised. You do find a lot of the senior officers talking about digitisation without having done it or really understand, what is required to do it. And that's not a criticism. I mean, that's just an aspect of where they are at that point in an age now where we're digitising. So, that does cause a challenge. But I think it's about being able to make the case compelling and then show that it can be done and delivers benefits. Now, Discom is really lucky in that regard because we're in a pretty unique situation. We're the only organisation in defence that does what we do. So a lot of this has been within our own control. So we've very much taken the approach of transform what's within our control first, and then look to promote that and then broaden that out to other areas of defence. In our case, really going towards the two different ends of the support chain. So, like sort of build and they will come approach. I think that whereas other organisations that would have a much more, replication, or they're not only a single user, would find it more challenging. And, that there is a cultural aspect to that. I do think on the whole, our workforce is also pretty analog in their outlook, perhaps not some of the youngsters coming through, but certainly at the middle management level. And again, that has been a challenge, as change is always seen as a threat, particularly when you're taking control of their specific pool of data away from them.
Excellent, thanks. Steve, what about sort of culture in the commercial enterprise? Same kind of issues?
Yeah, and it takes good leaders, I have to say. It takes visionary leaders, because a lot of the stuff that we do around AI, robotics, is actually is driven from the top. It's driven from our CEO. He absolutely gets the digital transformation journey. He recognises the need and is very supportive of that. So, yeah, it's the fear of failure, I suppose, is something you want to remove from your organisation. Nigel mentioned it earlier, and we, I'm not saying nobody's had a bollocking, Angus, we've all had a bollocking, haven't we? But I'll give you the fear of failure. Once you get past it, what have you done? What have you learned? Go again. I think that's when an organisation changes its culture.
Yeah, brilliant. I've had plenty of good tellings off in my time. I kind of got over them as I got older.
I have less now that you've left the organisation.
Excellent. That's good. Gavin, did you want to add anything to that as a kind of a practitioner of pressing cultural change on people?
Yeah, I think it's generally about getting people involved in the change early. Don't force change upon people. Make them feel part of the change. And certainly, I don't have all the answers, and nor does Brigadier Nigel, although he'll tell me he does. But it's definitely about leveraging everybody's knowledge within the organisation. And an air mover corporal that's been in the RAF for 22 years clearly knows more about movements than I. So it's a good opportunity to ensure that the change is going to land well, but also to reap that information out of the individual at the same time. So I think early engagement with the people that you're going to change with, not to, I think is probably my message. And
I would add to that, because actually I think that's a really pertinent point, and we live that, because of course through this transformation process, Discom switched its from being in DNS, Defence Equipment and Support, over into UK Stratcom. So our transformation was in flight. So we were having, if you like, to in brief a whole new sort of chain of command to support what we were doing, and, you know, which we've achieved. But it did take a considerable amount of additional work.
Excellent.
I think Nigel as well. You're agile. You're trying to adopting agile. At least you can show some results, because a lot of people need to see it to believe it. And therefore, if you've got a massive program of 5 years, well, by the time you've got there, you start another 5 years, another 5 years, another. So arguably, the agile approach delivers benefit, and people see it, because we've all got to experience it sometimes to actually believe it.
So, Steve, that is right on the money. As we hopefully demonstrated in our presentation, you know, we were absolutely determined to start delivering. You know, we're very critical of some of these more glacial programs, and we wanted to make sure that there was traction early on. We had something to show that, you know, the possibilities, but also to start delivering benefit against that investment. Very determined, but it's much easier said than done.
Excellent. And I've got a couple of questions that have come in separately on my net. Steve, I'll start with one with you, which has kind of sparked a bit of interest here. So you mentioned two of your client experiences, Electricity Northwest and United Utilities, both of which have outsourced their end-to-end supply chain, both of which are critical service providers. The question is how is the digitization of that end-to-end outsourced supply chain driven confidence into the client that outsourcing is something they can rely on? So I guess it's a reliability question.
So it's all about delivery, but it's, to be fair, Angus, it's all about partnerships, because partnerships are, it's an easy word to say, but I do think with both those clients and many of the clients, you've got long term. It's not customer supplier. It is absolutely partnership. It's working and getting a bit of skin in the game. You know, too many times, and you probably could name some organisations. Too many times, you say, "Well, I'm talking to you. Where's the budget? Where's the funding? I'm not doing anything." So arguably, getting a bit of skin in the game, proving things, coming up with. I mean, we've presented our IT, and you've seen that. We've presented all that kind of IT strategy capability to those clients, and we've actually helped them with their thinking. So in our world, going from, because TVS is a 4PL, really aspiring always to be a 5PL about helping a client with its strategy. Those clients are often constrained. They've implemented SAP, they can't get out of it, they can't change it, it's mega bucks to do anything. So to me, it's all about that engagement, little experiments. For example, really good example from a digitisation point of view, Electricity Northwest deploy backup generators. You know, if your home's got no power, we deploy it. Well, okay, how are we going to manage that? How are we going to make sure we're tracking that bit of kit? How are we going to make sure we replenish with fuel? How are we going to get it to the right place? How long do we need it? All those kind of things, working with the client and getting skin in the game absolutely gives confidence that, you know, they've chosen a partner, and you hope to have a long-term relationship. We invest for the future, not just short-term things with our clients. I would hope they would say. Excellent.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to come to there's another question from Nick, which is really a kind of a Discom focused question. It says, to what extent do the Discom improvements enhance interoperability through systems like LogFAS?
I guess I'll start, and then I'll hand over to the much more technically orientated Gav. But I mean, that's all about understanding your sort of data interface requirements. And I wouldn't just limit it to LogFAS, as we seek to become more integrated with other systems that operate in both now in defence, such as Box on the air side, but also in the future. And I guess without oversimplifying it, one thing that I have come to learn, and I am by no means an expert, is that if we get the zeros and ones right in the right format and stored in an accessible way, then, you know, the possibilities are almost endless.
Yeah, I think probably not got much more to add than that, other than if we'd have rewound two years ago, then Nick, we would have been totally analog, and we would have had no data to impacts in or out of Logfast in that instance. So it's about almost taking that first step forward to digitisation and going away from an analog nature towards a more digital approach allows you to at least have data to whatever it be without it getting totally geeky in terms of APIs and all that kind of good stuff. But the passage of information, at least we've taken that step to having the data in a repository that we can exchange with other systems.
And more specifically, Nick, so Logfast is on our radar for year 3, and we're hoping to be able to have the capability to take the design of the forces, for those who don't know Logfast, but effectively that's the sort of demand signal that comes to us from Permanent Joint Headquarters of these are the forces we want to deploy. We can take that from Logfast and put it into a outload planning tool that we've developed that will then effectively give us the whole outload schedule that we can effectively dial up or down depending on number of aircraft, points of embarkation and shipping available, etc. So quite exciting, and it's it's achievable. It's very much within the here and now of the art of possible.
Great, thanks, guys. Steve, there's an interesting one here, which I think kind of comes back to your point about ease of applications, but I think in a much more kind of focused way. So the question says, how do you evolve away from legacy applications when the level of technological competence is alarming?
I suppose I'd say, Angus, it's a bit like the old how do you eat an elephant piece by piece. You've got to, if you're going to move away from some of those legacy mod systems, you've got to carve it up. You've got to look at, going back to the agile, how can I deliver something that can sit alongside those current systems that you can see benefit and you can continue to deliver it? Because you're not, the massive jump of where you are to a new world is a massive transformation. It's probably, I'm not saying it's unachievable, but it's just such a big challenge. I absolutely get that, but it's piece by piece. I remember, I'll go back to the LCST bidding days. I actually offered, because as you do, I offered our PDM system because you had a master data management initiative, and I said, where are you with that? Well, we've been at this 3 years. That was 5 years ago. I said, well, we're going to go through it in this journey. Why don't you jump on board? So it's probably not an easy question to answer, but again, it's piece by piece. There are some logical segments and clear, and I think, and Gav mentioned at the end of his, data. That data is so critical. So start at the foundations. Don't start at the top. Start at the bottom.
Yeah. Great point. I'll make this the last question because we're going to enter the bottom half of the hour. And I think it's a question that really applies to both, but I'll come to Nigel first. And it's one of those kind of, all-encompassing ones. How do you digitize out customer poor behavior?
Well, that's a really interesting one. So what we have done, so taking the demand planning tool as an example, we've introduced KPIs within that, where we sit monthly with the frontline commands, and we measure both our ability to respond, but also their data inputs in terms of timeliness and quality. And we have already seen in the short journey we have traveled thus far, improving customer behavior in that respect. So they understand effectively that they need to give us as much information as possible in a longer lead time than we previously used to practice. And and the obvious outcome to that is they get a better service, and they can see that because at the same time we've got KPIs that are measuring that performance.
Steve?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The data analytics over the data to see the behavior of certain users, whether it's managing who's ordering SPC codes at certain times, or what kind of, are we getting regular patterns of demand? Then it's all about investing in a good data lake with good analytical tools that manage the simple things. Again, don't build it quickly, build bits and build as you go along, because you're going to adjust it. I think during one of the things that we had to do during pandemic was very quickly look at the changing behaviours of those kind of clients that I showed you before. Just think I didn't talk to it. The beverage world, beverage world dropped off a cliff, didn't it? We stopped. Demands just went off. They came back up again. They spiked. Actually, yesterday was in the last 5 years, yesterday was our busiest day ever as an organisation yesterday, in terms of lights going out, because beverages coming back online, so it's all about, and if you can't trust the data, then clearly you're going to make some bad business decisions. That was always I remember the conversations about MJDI, reason for demand. Do I trust it? If I trusted it, I'd make some better decisions. So getting good, accurate data capture systems to then use that data to get some really good, simple analytics is key.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, everybody, I just really want to say thank you very much on a number of levels. Can I just say thanks very much, first of all, to Cloud Hill and to the RLC Foundation gang for putting this together today, but very particularly to our presenters, Brigadier Nigel, Gavin and Steve, for giving us the time and the insights into their particular experiences of digitisation, within the scope of digital transformation, which is a very particular, application in terms of, taking something forward and how you make it work. I think, like all these things, what I've taken away is it's tough. You've got to think it through. You've got to have a plan. You've got to understand what it is you want to achieve. You need to understand what is the art of the possible. And of course, I could not agree more with the bit that I think everybody was agreeing on, which is short-term wins to show what success looks like is absolutely critical to it. What I would say though is the one thing, like all things with change in life, you have to start somewhere. And I think you can see from both what Steve said and what Nigel and Gavin were saying, you've got to start, and it's going to be a bumpy road. But somewhere in there's enough goodness to kind of take forward, show the way. As I said, I always thought of Discom and their journey and to see it as a digital startup in defence. And as you see them kind of 2 years down the line with that, with some remarkable results, and TVS with their very large customer base, very obviously technically based in the way they deliver their services to them. Remarkable, frankly, in the way that you keep that level of service up and the confidence levels up in customers, based on very technical delivery. So thank you very much to everybody. I hope the audience has both enjoyed that and gained some insights into digitisation, the centrality of data, and how it's being taken forward both in defence but also with a commercial slant to it. So thank you guys, and have a good rest of the day. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye now.